This week in CIST 2612, Computer Forensics, we're going to look at Chapter 1, Understanding the Digital Forensics Profession and Investigations. The objective of this chapter is to describe the field of digital forensics. We're going to explain how to prepare for computer investigations and also summarize the difference between public sector and private sector investigations. We'll also explain the importance of maintaining professional conduct, how to prepare for a digital forensic investigation by taking a systematic approach. We'll also look at procedures for private sector digital investigations. We'll look at the requirements for data recovery, workstations, and software. And finally, we're going to summarize how to conduct an investigation and also critique a case. Digital forensics. This involves obtaining and analyzing digital information that's going to be used as evidence in either a civil, criminal, or administrative cases. The actual definition for forensics also includes that we have to have the proper search authority, chain of custody, validation with mathematics, use of validated tools, repeatability, reporting, and possible expert presentation. Now, the standards for digital forensics was set up in October 2012. And it was ratified by the International Organization for Standardization. We also have the federal rules of evidence. Many states' rules are going to be mapped to the federal rules of evidence. This was created to ensure consistency in the federal proceedings. This was signed into law in 1973. We also have the FBI has their computer analysis and response team, or the CART team. This was formed in 1984, and this is set up to handle cases involving digital evidence. Now, by the late 90s, they had teamed up with the Department of Defense, Computer Forensics Laboratory. You need to be aware of the Fourth Amendment. The Fourth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, it protects everyone's rights to be secure from search and seizure. This includes a person's body, residence, and property. With this, though, search warrants will be needed, but a separate search warrant might not be necessary for digital evidence. Now, this is going to be something that is going to be under jurisdiction. That each U.S. jurisdiction has case law that's related to the admissibility of evidence recovered from computers and digital devices. Okay, when you're investigating digital evidence devices, this includes collecting the data securely, investigate or examining suspect data to determine details such as the origin and the content, presenting the digital information to the courts, and then applying laws to the digital device practices. Digital forensics is different from data recovery. That's going to be the retrieving information that was deleted by mistake or lost in a power surge or server crash. Digital forensics, they investigate the data that can be retrieved from a computer's hard drive or other storage medium. We also have network forensics that yields information about how a perpetrator or attacker gained access to a network. Data recovery, typically you know what you're looking for in data recovery. Digital forensics, you're recovering data that users have hidden or deleted, and you're recovering it to use as evidence. This is something that can be incriminating evidence. Also, our forensic investigators often work as part of a team. This is known as an investigations triad. So we see on the screen here the investigations triad. With this, you have a vulnerability, threat assessment, and risk management side, a network intrusion detection and incident response, And then also you have uh, digital investigation. Now, in smaller companies, one group might perform all of these tasks in this investigation. Larger companies may have more employees, more teams, more people to work in these individual teams. Now, when you work in a vulnerability assessment and risk management team, you test and verify the integrity of the standalone workstations and network servers. The professionals that are in this team are going to have skills in network intrusion detection and incident response. The network intrusion detection incident response, this group detects intruder attacks using automated tools, and they also monitor network firewall logs. And then we look at the digital investigation group. That's a team that manages investigations and conducts forensics analysis of systems that are suspected of containing evidence related to an incident or a crime. Now we look at a brief history of digital forensics. So that by the 1970s, electronic crimes were increasing, especially when it was dealing with the financial sector. Law enforcement officials didn't know enough about computers to ask the right questions or to preserve the evidence for trial. So we'll get to the 1980s, the PCs have started gaining popularity. Different operating systems have emerged. You have the disk operating system, or the DOS, was available in a lot of different varieties, a lot of different versions. Forensic tools back then were very simple, and most of them were created and generated by government agencies. When we go to the 90s, or excuse me, the mid 80s, we had Xtrego. That appeared on the market, and what it did is it recognized file types and retrieved lost or deleted files. After that, you soon had a program come out called Norton's Disk Edit. That became the best tool for using to find deleted files. So we go to 1987. Apple is now producing the Mac SE, which is a Macintosh with an external Easy Drive hard drive that had a massive 60 megabytes of storage. We also look at, now in the early 90s, we have specialized tools that are coming out for computer forensics. We have the International Association of Computer Investigative Specialists. They've started introducing training on software for digital forensics. And the IRS created search warrant programs as well. Expert witness was also created by ASR Data for the Macintosh. This was the first GUI software for computer forensics. Expert witness could not recover, or could recover, deleted files and fragments of deleted files. As hard drives became larger, we had new problems come up for investigators. So other software was developed, such as the Access Data Forensic Toolkit and iLook. Understanding the case law. Know this first: the existing law can't keep up with the rate of technological changes. Technology is going to change a lot quicker than laws can be written. So when you have something like this happen where a statute doesn't exist, a regulation doesn't exist, a case law is going to be used. In case law, that allows legal counsel to use previous cases with similar to the current one because the laws do not yet exist. Now when this happens, each case law is going to be evaluated on its own merit and issues. So, as you see on the screen here, the examiners must be familiar with recent court rulings on search and seizure in the electronic environment. So you have to be aware of what happened recently and how it applies to your investigation. When you're developing digital forensic resources, you need to be familiar with more than one type of operating system, more than one type of computing platform. So you may need to know DOS or Windows 98, Windows XP, previous versions of Windows, Linux, Mac, Macintosh operating systems, and also the current Windows platform. Maybe a good idea for you to think about joining as many computer groups as you can, both in the private and public sector. Consult outside experts. When we're preparing for digital investigations, we've got two different categories that they're going to fall under. You have your public sector investigations and your private sector investigations. Our public sector are going to be government agencies, so forth. Private sector is going to be private organizations. Public sector involves government agencies, and they're responsible for criminal investigations and prosecutions. Now, these organizations must observe legal guidelines, such as the Fourth Amendment, which would restrict the search and seizure. The Department of Justice, they will update information on computer search and seizures regularly, while the public sector searches really for focuses on criminal activity and investigations for prosecution. The private sector investigations focus more on policy violations. So when we're looking at, once again, the public sector, you must understand the laws on computer-related crimes. So the standard legal process, guidelines on the search and seizure, how to build a criminal case. Now, they also had the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. That was passed in 1986. The states are going to have specific state laws. Generally, these are going to be developed after the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. Going back here to the private sector. In the private sector, these are corporations that it's going to deal with private companies. A lot of times non-law enforcement government agencies and lawyers will be involved. Private investigations aren't governed directly by criminal law or Fourth Amendment issues. They're going to be governed by internal policies that are written. It's going to define how the employees' behavior and conduct in the workplace should be conducted. Private companies also involve litigation disputes. Most of these investigations are going to be conducted in civil cases as well in that. So looking at the legal process, This is going to depend on the local customs, legislative standards, rules of evidence. With this, now the criminal investigation, this usually begins when someone finds evidence or witnesses a crime. So from there, they're going to make a allegation to the police. From there, a police officer will interview the complainant, write a report about the crime. From there, a police blotter provides a record of clues to crimes that have been committed previously. Now, blotters now are generally going to be electronic files. So in there, the investigator now delegates, collects, and processes the information related to the crime. Or to the complaint. We'll also see here a digital evidence first responder and a digital evidence specialist. All right, a first responder, they arrive on the incident scene, assess the situation, take precautions to acquire and preserve the evidence. While the digital evidence specialist, those are people that have the skills to analyze the data and determine whether another specialist should be called in to assist. Affidavit is a sworn statement in support of facts about evidence or crime submitted to a judge to request a search warrant. So these must include the exhibits that support the allegation. So it must be something that must be notarized under a sworn oath. Now a judge must approve and sign a search warrant before you can use it to collect the evidence. So after you built your case, that information has to be turned over to a prosecutor before it can go to trial or be prosecuted. When we look at private sector investigations, private sector investigations include private companies and lawyers who address company policy violation and litigation disputes. Now, some of the corporate computer crimes involved may include something like email harassment, falsification of data, gender or age discrimination, embezzlement, sabotage, or industrial espionage. Now, in these businesses, they're going to strive to minimize or eliminate litigation. So they can reduce the risk of litigation. One way to do this is to publish and maintain policies that employees can find easy, and they can read it and follow the policies. These provide a lot of authority for businesses to conduct internal investigations also. Now, well-defined policies give computer investigators and forensic examiners the authority to conduct an investigation. Businesses can also avoid litigation by displaying a warning banner on computer screens. Okay, what these do is they inform the end users that the organization reserves the right to inspect computer systems and the network traffic at will. You'll see an example on the screen here, a sample warning banner. And this is something that normally appears when the computer starts up or connects to the company internet, network, VPN. This warning banner establishes a right to conduct an investigation. So some sample text back on the warning banner. It says that this use of the system and network is for official business only. System and network are subject to monitoring at any time by the owner. Using the system implies consent to monitoring by the owner. An unauthorized or illegal use of the system or network will be subject to discipline or prosecution. So these are some sample texts that may be placed on a banner. Okay, an authorized requester has the power to conduct investigations. Now, this policy should be defined by executive management. We'll see some examples of groups with the authority, maybe the Corporate Ethics Office, Internal Auditing, the Equal Employment Opportunity Office, or General Counsel or Legal Department. Now, the most common type of situation that require conducting a security investigation in a corporate environment, those include email abuse, abuse or misuse of computing assets, internet abuse. So what you do is enter a private investigation. You search for evidence to support allegations of the violation of the company's policy, or maybe an attack on its assets. As a private sector investigator, your job is to minimize the risk to the company. You should also be able to distinguish between the company's abuse problems and also potential criminal problems as well. Now, with this, the federal rules of evidence, those are the same for civil and criminal matters. We also have, as you will see, a more bring your own device environment where the distinction between personal and company computer property that can be sometimes blurred, difficult to deal with, especially with cell phones, smartphones, tablets. You can define this in policy that if you connect a personal device to a business network, then it's going to follow in the same rules as a company's property. Okay, when maintaining personal conduct, professional conduct, this is going to include that your ethics, morals, standards of behaviors. Now, as a digital investigation and forensics analysis, it's critical because it's critical to maintain a professional conduct because it's going to determine your credibility. A couple things you need to maintain your objectivity, which means you must form and sustain unbiased opinions on your case. You must also maintain your credibility by keeping the case confidential. When you're in a corporate environment, that confidentiality is going to be critical. Now, there are rare instances where your corporate case might become a criminal case. Sometimes maybe as serious as a murder investigation. You can also enhance your professional conduct by continuing your training, attending workshops, conferences, vendor courses, and also maybe having a professional organization, a membership into one, to add to your credentials as well. Now, when we prepare for a digital forensics investigation, we look at the role of a digital forensics professional. Your role is to gather evidence to prove that a suspect committed a crime or violated a company policy. Now, when you collect evidence, collecting evidence, you want to make sure that it can be offered in court or at a corporate inquiry. This will include the investigating the suspect's computer and preserving the evidence on a different computer. You also want to make sure that you maintain the chain of custody, which is the route the evidence takes from the time you find it until the case is closed or it goes to court. So you have a log of everyone that had access to that evidence. Information that's stored on a computer or that's on a computer can be used to help law enforcement, and it can allow them to determine the chain of events leading up to the crime or evidence that can lead to the conviction. This data can help solve cases. Law enforcement officers, they should also follow proper procedures when acquiring the evidence. This is something where digital evidence can be easily altered by an over-eager investigator. So we also have challenges for evidence. One of the challenges might be the information on hard drive might be password protected. So you would need to use a specific forensics tool that may be needed. When we look at company policy violations, if an employee doesn't follow the company policy or they misuse resources, it can cost a company a lot of money, sometimes millions of dollars. Some of these misuses include surfing the internet, sending personal emails, using company computers for personal tasks during work hours. When we look at taking a systematic approach, we got some steps for problem solving that we will follow. First, we'll make an initial assessment about the type of case we're investigating. We'll determine a preliminary design or approach to the case, create a detailed checklist, determine the resources you'll need for the case, obtain and copy an evidence drive. We're going to identify the risk, mitigate or minimize those risks, test the design. We'll analyze and recover the digital evidence, investigate the data that you recover. We'll also complete the case report. And then finally, we will critique the case. Now, when you're doing these, the amount of time and effort for each one of these steps will going to vary depending on the case you are investigating. It's just not something that you're just going to spend this amount of time on each step for every case. So when we look at assessing the cases, first we need to outline the case before determining the case requirements. Then we systematically outline the case details. We look at our situation, the nature of the case, specifics of the case, type of evidence, the known disk format, and also the location of the evidence. Now, based on these details, we can determine the case requirements. When we are looking at planning our investigation steps, a couple things we need to look at. We develop a plan for the following activities. We acquire the evidence, complete an evidence form and establish a chain of custody, transport the evidence to a computer forensics lab, secure the evidence in an approved secure container, prepare the forensic workstation. We go back and retrieve the evidence from the secure container, make a forensics copy, return the evidence to the container, and then we process the forensics copy with the appropriate computer forensics tools. Now, an evidence custody form, this helps us document what has been done with the original evidence and its forensics copy. This is also called a chain of evidence form. If we have a broken chain of custody, this could cause our evidence to be thrown out or throughout the entire case. So it's very important that we document the evidence during a forensic analysis. We got two types of evidence custody forms. We have a single evidence form, which is a list of each piece of evidence on a separate page, and then a multi-evidence form. So we'll take a look at a multi-evidence form. This is for a private sector environment. A couple things you'll see on here is a case number, the investigating organization, the investigator's name, the nature of the case, location of evidence, where the evidence was obtained, a description of the evidence, vendor name, model number or serial number, the evidence recorded by, space, date and time, evidence placed in locker, item number, or the evidence processed by, description, disposition of evidence, date, time, and also the page number as well. So this is an example of a multi-evidence form. We see a single evidence form here. Now, when we secure our evidence, there are some considerations you need to follow when handling computer evidence. You need to worry about static electricity, so you may use anti-static bags or anti-static pads. Well-padded containers. The padding will help prevent damage during transportation. You want to seal all openings with evidence tape, which then you would write your initials on the tape to prevent the tape evidence from being altered. You also have to worry about temperature or humidity ranges. So you want to make sure it's secured in a secure container so it's safe from the temperature and humidity. So when we look at private sector high-tech investigations, the procedures for this, you need to develop formal procedures and informal checklist. So you want to make sure you cover all important issues in your high-tech investigations, and also ensure that the correct techniques are used in the investigation. When you're dealing with an employee termination case, this is something that a majority of the investigations are going to take place with. Maybe the employee abuse of corporate assets. So these incidents can cause a hostile work environment. When these cases are investigated, now the organization must have appropriate policies in place for dealing with abuse of corporate assets. So when we're looking at the internet abuse investigations, a couple things we'll need. We'll need the organization's internet proxy server logs, the suspect computer's IP address, suspect's computer disk drive, and also the preferred computer forensic analysis tool. And it's recommended we follow these steps. So in here we use the standard forensic analysis techniques and procedures. Use appropriate tools. We'll extract all web pages and URL information. We'll connect or contact the network firewall administrator and request a proxy server log. We'll then compare the data recovered from the forensics analysis to the proxy server log. We'll also continue analyzing the computer's disk drive data. Okay, when you're conducting an email abuse investigation, you will need a copy, electronic copy of the defendant email that will also contain the message header data. If it is available, maybe an email server log records. If the email system stores the user's message on a central server, you'll need access to that server. Access to the computer that you can perform forensics analysis on it. And also make sure that you have your preferred computer forensics analysis tool. When working through an email abuse investigation, recommended steps is to use the standard forensic analysis techniques, obtain an electronic copy of the suspect and the victim's email folder or data. If you're doing a web-based email investigation, you would use a tool such as FTK's Internet Keyword Search option, which then would extract all related email address information. And you also want to make sure that you examine the header data for all messages of interest to the investigation. Now, under attorney-client privilege, you must keep all findings confidential. Now, many attorneys may want printouts of the data that you recovered. You may also have to do persuade and educate many attorneys on how digital evidence can be viewed electronically. You can also encounter a problem if you find the data as binary files. Now, when you're conducting an investigation that has attorney-client privilege, a couple steps you need to follow. Request a memorandum from the attorney, direct you to start the investigation. Request a list of keywords of interest to the investigation. From there, you go into initiate the investigation analysis. If you're looking at a disk drive, an examination of disk drive, you make 2-bit stream images using different tools for each image. You want to verify the hash signatures on all the files on the original and recreated disk. You also then want to methodically examine every portion of the disk drive and extract all the data. You'll run keyword searches on all allocated and unallocated disk space. If you're working with a Windows operating system, you'll use specialty tools to analyze and extract the data from the registry. If it's binary, such as CAD drawings, you'll locate the correct software product. If it's unallocated data recovery, are you going to use a tool that's going to remove or replace non-printable data? You'll also want to consolidate all of your recovered data from the evidence bit streams into a well-organized file, folders and subfolders. Some other guidelines we would follow in attorney-client privilege investigations would include minimizing written communications with the attorney. Any documentation that is written to the attorney must contain a header stating that it's privileged legal communication, confidential work product. And you'll also want to make sure you assist the attorney and paralegal in analyzing the data. If you're dealing with industrial espionage investigations, every suspected industrial espionage case should be treated as a criminal investigation. You will need some staff for these. You will need a digital investigator who's responsible for the digital forensics examinations, technology specialist who's going to be knowledgeable of the suspected compromised technical data, network specialists who can perform log analysis and set up network sniffers, and you would also need a threat assessment specialist. These are something that's typically going to be an attorney. Guidelines that you have for industrial espionage investigation. These include determining whether the investigation involves a possible industrial espionage incident. You'll want to make sure you consult with attorneys and upper management. Also determine what information is needed to substantiate the allegation. You generate a list of all keywords for disk forensics and sniffer monitoring. List and collect resources for the investigation. Determine the goals and scope of the investigation. And also initiate the investigation after approval from management. Now, when you're planning these things to consider include examining all email of the suspected employees, search internet, message boards, forums, blogs, initiate the physical surveillance, examine all facility physical access laws for sensitive areas, determine the suspect's location in relation to the vulnerable asset. You also want to make sure you study the suspect's work habits, and also collect all incoming and outgoing phone logs. So when we're conducting this, some steps we will follow when conducting an industrial espionage case. We're going to gather all of the team and all personnel assigned to the investigation and brief them on the plan, gather the resources to conduct the investigation. We're going to start the investigation by placing surveillance systems at key locations. And we're going to discreetly gather additional evidence. We'll collect all the log data from the networks and email servers. Also, we'll make sure that you report regularly to the management and corporate attorneys. And also review the investigation scope with the management and corporate attorneys as well. When we're doing interviews and interrogations and high-tech investigations, you may have to interview or interrogate suspects, witnesses. So being a skilled interviewer or interrogator, this is something that can take many years of experience. When we do interviews, these are usually conducted to collect information from a witness or suspect about specific facts related to the investigation. On the other hand, interrogation, that's a process of trying to get the suspect to confess to the crime or a specific incident. Now, your role as a computer investigator is to instruct the investigator conducting the interview on what questions to ask and what the answers should be. When we're looking at it, an interview or interrogation, the ingredients to make this successful is be patient throughout the session. Repeating or rephrasing questions to zero in on specific facts from a reluctant witness or a suspect, and also being tenacious. When we look at data recovery from workstations or softwares, the investigations, they are conducted on computer forensics labs or data recovery labs. Data recovery, customer or company just wants the data back. A computer forensic workstation is a specially configured PC, and it's going to be loaded with additional bays and forensic software. We want to make sure that we avoid altering the evidence. So we use write blockers devices, which enables you to boot Windows without writing data to the evidence drive. We're setting up a workstation. A couple things we need to look at as our basic requirements is we have a workstation running Windows 7 or later, write blocker device, a digital forensics accusation tool, digital forensics analysis tool, target drive to receive the source or suspect disk data, have a spare PATA or SATA ports, and USB ports as well. Now we can have some other things that will be useful for our digital forensics workstation. have a NIC card, extra USB ports, FireWire cards or ports, SCSI card, maybe a disk editor tool, text editor tool, graphics viewer program, or maybe some other specialized viewing tool, depending on what we're having to recover. Now, when we start gathering the evidence we identified in our investigation plan when we're conducting our investigation, when we look at this, the items we're going to need to conduct an investigation include the original storage media, the evidence custody form, evidence container from the storage media, a bitstream imaging tool, forensic workstation to copy and examine your evidence, and also a securable evidence locker, cabinet, or safe. We want to make sure that when we're gathering this evidence, we avoid damaging the evidence. Steps that we might take in gathering evidence, these include meeting the IT manager and interviewing him. Once again, we want to fill out the evidence form, have the IT manager sign it. We'll place the evidence in a secure container, carry that evidence to the computer forensics lab. We're then going to complete the evidence custody form, and then we'll secure the evidence by locking the container. Okay, a bitstream copy. We've talked about that through this presentation. A bitstream copy, it's a bit-by-bit copy of the original drive or storage media. So it's an exact copy of the original disk. Now, it's different from a simple backup because backup software only copies known files. Backup software cannot copy deleted files, email messages, or recover file fragments. A bitstream image, this is a file as a container of a bitstream copy. So it's a file containing a bitstream copy of all the data on the disk or partition. This is also going to be known as an image or an image file. Now, when we're doing this, the copy image file on target disk matches the original disk manufacturer, size, and model. So we want this all to set up to where it's the exact same. So we look here in figure 111. So we see our original disk, our image disk, our target disk. So we'll make sure that it is transferred, it's copied, and it's in the exact same spot on the image disk as it is copied from one to the other. All right, the first rule of digital forensics is to preserve the original evidence. We'll make sure that we conduct our analysis only on a copy of the data. We don't want to corrupt the original at all, or have the defense say that the data was changed or modified. Something was planted. So we'll make a copy of the original, and we work on that copy only. Now, we also have vendors that may provide a MS-DOS, Linux, Windows acquisition tools. The Windows tools require a write blocking device when acquiring the data from a FAT or NTFS file system. So once we've made a copy, we want to analyze the digital evidence. So in here, where the job is to recover data from deleted files, file fragments, or complete files. Now, deleted files, they are still sitting on the disk. So even though you may not see them, your operating system's hidden them. They still exist on your hard drive or your storage medium until new data is saved on the same physical location. So we can use some tools to retrieve those, such as autopsy. There are other files that can pull deleted files back, other tools. Disc digger is one that I personally like. Some steps that we would follow to analyze USB drive is to start autopsy. Create a new case, type in the case number, select the working folder. Then you would go through the steps to add the data source, no source data. So we'd select the data source type, select the image file, and then keep the default settings in the config ingest module window. When we want to display the contents of acquired data, we would click Views, File Types, by extension or documents to expand. Select the file to display, click Tag and Comment, and then click the New Tag Name button. Analyzing the data is where you search for information related to the complaint. Data analysis can be the most time-consuming task in this whole process. So we look at figure 112 here. It's showing you how to add steps into autopsy. So give it a case name, find the case type, base directory, and so forth through this. This is the new case window. When you're working with autopsy, a couple things you can do is you can search for keywords of interest in the case. You can display the results in a search result window. You click each file in the search result window and examine its content in the data area. Explore the data or export the data to the folder of your choice. You can also search for specific file names and generate a report of your activities. Another additional feature of autopsy, it does display binary data in the content viewer. So we see here on figure 118 how we can enter a search, and we can choose the different options here. For example, this is searching for the exact match of George. It will search through the data. Looking for the word George, you see that it has found data here. So we search for the data, and this here shows us the results in the work area. And we can go through each one of these files that it has found and search for and find the word George. This is showing you what the binary, the non-printable data in autopsy's content viewer will look like. Now, once we've finished and we're now into the completing the case part, we need to produce a final report. A couple things you do is discuss, or write out what you did and what you found in your investigation in this report. You want to include the autopsy report in there to document your work as well. You want to make sure that you have repeatable findings, showing that you can repeat the steps and produce the same results. You may also use a report template if you're required, but your report should show conclusive evidence. So it should show whether a suspect did or did not commit a crime or a violation of company policy. Now, back to the repeatable findings. If you repeat the process that's described in the result and you cannot achieve the same results, then that work has no value as evidence. you want to make sure that if your report, your steps should repeat and find the same results or have the same outcome. You may want to keep a journal of everything you do so your notes can be used in court. You want to answer the 6 W's. Who, what, when, where, why, and how. All right, so you must also explain computer and network processes. So you want to make sure that you are prepared for this. You want to use the autopsy report generator. So a couple ways this can generate reports. It can be printed out in plain text or an HTML or an Excel spreadsheet. So after this, you want to look at critiquing the case. Okay, this is where you make a self-evaluation of your work and you answer the following questions to yourself. How could you improve your performance in the case? Did you expect the results you found, or did the case develop in ways you did not expect? Was the documentation as thorough as it could have been? What feedback has been received from the requested source? Also, did you discover any new problems? And so, what were they? And did you use new techniques during the case or during research? Okay, so that's going to finish up for Chapter 1's lecture. If you have any questions, feel free to send me an email.